and is conducting postdoctoral research in international relations. So I'll leave it to him now. Jazakallah khairan for your presence, and thank you very much for attending.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. The book is published, by the way, brother. It's probably in your university by now, I think. It's called The Cutting Edge of the Poet's Soul. So we begin in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's wonderful being here back in Nottingham University with such wonderful people as yourselves. And so I think our topic today, inshallah, is a very important one. It's about our presence as human beings on this planet in the age of something in its obsessiveness that might be corrosive, i.e. the age of the selfie. Shakespeare once said, in fact, that humans are born great. Some people are born great, others have greatness thrust upon them, others achieve greatness, but I don't think he would ever have imagined a world like our world, in which you simply pay for a publicist to make yourself look great. And that's what we're challenged with, therefore. It's about perceptions and image making, and how we see ourselves as human beings in this world, in light of the fact that it's so easy to make an image, to carve an image of yourself, an image therefore that you live in, you live by, you live for, as opposed to an ideal. If you think about images for a moment, and about the kind of the ethics behind the age of the selfie, we have Daniel Bernstein wrote a book in the 1960s, I think, called The Image: A Guide to Pseudo Events in America, in which he contrasted between the image and the ideal. The image being like a trademark, something that you see in yourself, comes from yourself, but not something that you stand for or represent, but something that is created for you. And you don't serve, or the image serves you as opposed to you serving the image. Something that you make in your mold. Whereas the ideal, in fact, not represented by a trademark, but in fact by a value. Not something that you serve, but something that you serve as opposed to something that serves you. And an ideal is not something that exists because of your creation. It's something that has existed before you. You fit, therefore, into the value based upon your effort and your perceptions in life. The image, however, is more superficial because it's something that's created around you in your mold. And therefore, Bernstein speaks about the celebrity culture as a manifestation of that. That we as human beings, we satisfy our own exaggerated of human greatness and therefore invent the idea of the celebrity. He has in fact done the contrast between the celebrity and then the hero, let's say in the 19th century. In his book he speaks about the doctor. The doctor was seen therefore as heroic by the people. What was uniquely different is the fact that the doctor was discreet, didn't like to be seen, didn't like to be known, and people would therefore whisper about the doctor, and he was seen as a kind of a heroic model of value. It's quite different today because we have, as human beings, almost an obsession to want to be seen. And we have therefore tools like social media or Facebook or whatever that project us, that simply show us as opposed to showing the real us or the internal of the us. And so therefore in Islam we have two molds, Surat al-Insan al-Zahira and Surat al-Insan al-Batina. We have the outer form of man. And there can be no discrimination in the outer form of man because you had no choice in that. Allah made you like that. And Allah in the Quran emphasizes الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه. Allah is one that beautified, made beautiful everything Allah created. Allah is أحسن الخالقين. Allah is the best of formers and creators. And so as human beings we could look differently, but that has no bearing on our internal states or on our conduct or on our values. It reminds me in fact of an article I read years ago now about a famous person in this country I won't name, but it had something like front page, I love everything about my body. And it was, I like my hair, I like my nails, I like my skin and everything. And the only thing that was lacking in fact in the article was, I like my values and I like my morals and I like my ethics and I like my character. All of these things, the ones that are essential, transcendental, were the ones that were missing, and the ones that were there were the ones that were on the outside. Now if there's too much of an obsession, and it's going to create a culture of envy, a culture of rivalry, because all you're seeing greatness based upon your outer form. The Prophet of Islam would say that when we would see our reflection in the mirror, or the water, we're supposed to say, Allahumma ahsan khuluqi kama ahsanta khalqi. Oh Allah, make my character excellent the way that you've made my form excellent. Outer form. The outer form is beautiful, we can beautify it, that's fine. But the point is, that's not the truest reflection of ourselves. And the moment it does become that, then it's problematic, because you're not seeing anything else except yourself. Right? So if you think about the unseen, the unheard, and the unloved, the topic of today's talk, what is the meaning of Islamic empathy in an age of the selfie? You can't have that. You can't see that because you're only seeing yourself. You're only self-grandeur. But it's only because of something obsolete. Why is it obsolete? Because every time I had to make a passport some years back, and so my last passport was 10 years ago passport, and it was expiring. And so the regulations are that if you look different to how you look in the picture from before, you have to get a new picture and it has to be signed by somebody. And so I went to my mom and I said, look, I think I look exactly the same. Went to my wife, exactly the same, right? Even though, of course, it's not exactly the same because you've aged. But it's sometimes hard for you to believe that you're actually, do you look different when you're aging? Of course you do. But you don't notice it because it's by the day, by the month, and then years, and you look a bit different. But you didn't notice it. Why? Because we're seeing a flurry of images of oneself in the mirror, and you don't keep track of it. You don't keep track of the subtle, minute differences in your face, in your images, in the passing of time, right? But that's the whole point. You do change. Allah in the Quran, for example, gives the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Ibrahim alayhi salam. Allah in the Quran says, فَلَمَّا جَنَّ عَلَيْهِ اللَّيْلُ رَأَى كَوْكَبًا. When the night sat upon them, he saw a star. قال هذا ربي. He says, this is my Lord. فلما أفل قال لا أحب الأفلين. And when the star vanished from view, أفل means to disappear, to vanish. He said, I don't love things that vanish, disappear. And then he saw the moon and says, هذا ربي. This must be my Lord. Meaning he's teaching his people, this can't be your Lord, truly. And then Allah says, of course, that also disappeared. Because then the day came and then the moon disappeared. And then he says, this can't be the one. And then he saw the sun in the day. He says, هذا ربي هذا أكبر. This is my Lord, this is a big one. And then of course the night came and the sun went out of view. He's teaching his people to think, rationalize what's truly your Lord that you worship. Not the things that are transitory, that simply are fleeting and passing by time, like the sun or the star or the moon. But when I read this verse, it reminded me in fact of our topic today, because I thought, Neil Gabler has a good book called Life the Movie, discusses celebrity culture, and Maureen Orth, a book called Shiny Objects. Maureen Orth. And they both speak about similar things. Neil Gabler is much before. He took a lot of his thinking from Daniel Borstein, who wrote The Image, by the way. But the idea was that you're dealing with a very quick, fast-changing current. So if you think about the celebrity would have a life on the stage, to come and to impress people. It could be, for example, that he or she has an industry behind him or her, a kind of fashion designers and costume designers and makeup artists and lighting, all of that. And all of that is to project the image of one person, right? But the image doesn't last too long, because when another person comes, more beautiful, more handsome, more pretty, they take the place. Until time passes, and you don't even remember the name of the one that was there in the first place. It's all passing. And Allah in the Quran here is giving the example of things that people did worship. And now, of course, maybe it's in a metaphoric sense, like you have stars in the making and you have the superstar. These were really stars, and the sun and the moon, that people did actually venerate and worship, but they were not the Lord that Ibrahim was calling his people to worship. Allah. Allah is Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum, Allah is all living, Allah is self-sufficient, Allah is self-existing, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we have, therefore, this idea of speed and of time. And so therefore, when you project yourself in the image, it's fine. I'm not saying I'm against the selfie or against it. I'm not. But what I'm saying is that if there's an obsessiveness in that, and that's the only thing that you're seeing, you're only seeing your own image, and you're only seeing your own greatness, because of a self-image, then you're losing track of the essence behind the affair, which is your character, which is your real being. Surat al-Insan al-Batina, which is the hidden being. The Prophet of Allah says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَىٰ أَجْسَامِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَىٰ صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ. Allah does not look at your forms or your sizes and your shapes and your images, but Allah looks at your hearts. What's most meaningful is your heart. What's emanating from your heart is the most meaningful thing. There was an article in The Guardian some months back called Compare and Despair. It was about Instagram, Compare and Despair. And they interviewed these young girls, 20 years old girls, about, some of them, they said we were obsessed with Instagram. One girl said it took 20 minutes for me to take a picture. 20 minutes taking a picture of myself because, and she said I couldn't do it because I noticed that my friends have more likes than my ones. And so I have to therefore compete with my friends to have the best picture with the best kind of, the lighting and the effects and everything to look the best in that picture. One single picture, 20 minutes. So it creates, and she says, I wasn't happy because it breeds a culture of rivalry that's kind of almost so superficial it doesn't exist in the first place. You will age. Everyone will age. You'll become weaker and age and everything. And so therefore, that's not the thing that Allah wants us to focus on. Allah wants us to focus on what's transcendental, what's more meaningful, right? What's above all of this, like not the superficial, but the one that transcends over and above, and that is the working of the heart. Allah in the Quran says, for example, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ, remember me and I will remember you. And if you think about the idea about wanting to be remembered, so you have the Instagram and the picture taking and the picture disseminating, and you want to be remembered, but you can't be remembered as much as you would like to because others are remembered more than you, because you don't have as many likes as the next person, right? So they have more likes than you, and so you think, well, maybe it's a good picture of myself, I look very nice in it, but I don't look as good as. And so the as good as is the problem. That's not going to breed happiness in yourself. It'll breed kind of inner resentment, inner dissatisfaction with yourself, even though Allah made you beautiful. But the point is, you're seeing beauty through a skewed lens. A skewed lens. Because that's not the essence of beauty. So when Shakespeare said, for example, people are born great, others have greatness thrust upon them. You could have greatness because of your lineage, born into a noble family, right? Or Othello, for example. But if you see that as the truest measure of your greatness, then you're not fulfilling your truest potential in life, which is to realize Allah. Which is to realize Allah. Now, you can't realize Allah if your heart is so trapped. If your heart's trapped, you can't see anything except yourself. You'll only see yourself. Every one of your footsteps, Neil Gable in fact says, Life the movie, he says, we as human beings become actors. We become actors as human beings. Our obsession with the image and image making and Hollywood and Bollywood, we become, it's as if, he says in his book, for example, we walk as if we're walking on the stage, right? Because we think all eyes are on us. And so everything about yourself, your clothing, your trademark, hairstyle, all of this resembles you. That's what you're selling the world. That's what you're giving to the world. This is me. Now what happens when you age? Now you need something different because it's not going to work. And somebody else will come behind you who's going to take your place and is more beautiful than you. Better hairstyle, better haircut than you. Right? So Allah in the Quran says, تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. These are days, Allah, we alternate between the people. Nothing remains forever. And Allah in the Quran gives us an example about it, and He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, اِعْلَمُوا أَنَّمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا لَعِبٌ وَلَهُ وَزِينَةٌ. Know that the life of this world is لَعِبٌ وَلَهُ وَزِينَةٌ. Play and amusement and rivalry and pomp. وَتَفَاخُرٌ بَيْنَكُمْ وَتَكَاثُرٌ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. And rivalry amongst yourselves, and increase in rivalry in wealth and in children. كَمَثَلِ غَيْثٍ. Just like the rainfall. أَعْجَبَ الْكُفَّارَ النَّبَاتُ. It pleases the farmer when he sees the rainfall because his crops will grow. ثُمَّ يَهِيجُ فَتَرَ مَصْفَرًا. And then his crops begin to wither away. And they turn yellow, مَصْفَرًا. Right? And then they simply vanish from view. And Allah therefore is coining for us an example in the Quran, that if we have an obsessiveness, not to say that we don't play, we do play, and it's good to play. And it's good to be amused, and it's good to amuse, and it's good. I'm not negating these things, but I'm saying if there is a culture of obsessiveness, then it's troubling. Because you're not realizing your truest potential as human beings, as Muslims, right? Because you're only seeing the outer mold of whatever amazing talent is hidden inside of you, right? And that's what the Prophet's companions. And so if you think about the Prophet's companions, I'll give you an example of the Quran first. Look at examples of power. Yesterday I was speaking on Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain. And so I was in Spain just some months back. We went to Seville, Granada, Cordoba, and anybody who's been to Spain and has studied a bit about Islamic history in Spain, you'd see a lot of icons and iconography, symbols and symbolism, architecture, amazing, beautiful things. Places, Alhambra Palace and the Alcazar in Seville, beautiful places. But there is a problem if the elegance becomes excessive, if the elegance becomes extravagant, if you turn the icon into purpose, if that becomes your purpose, the icon and the image itself. And so we saw this, right? That's not, if you think about Al-Andalus, you have power there, you have governorship, you have ruling, all amazing things. But Allah in the Quran, so when I was reminding people that Allah in the Quran gives us examples of power in the Quran. Now with power, if you have power, you could exert yourself, your power, authority, your kind of control over the people. And you see this in dictatorships, and you see this with tyrants and particular rulers in the world even today and before. Allah in the Quran gives us an example of Qarun. Inna Qaruna kana min qawmi Musa fabagha alayhim. Qarun was from the people of Musa, and he fabagha alayhim. He went against them, and he oppressed them. He was wrong, did wrong to them. And Allah says, وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ مَا إِنَّ مَفَاتِحَ لَتَنُوءُ بِالْعُصْبَةِ أُولِي الْقُوَّةِ. And we gave him from wealth. Interesting, Allah is fa'al. Allah is the one that gives. Even if Allah made somebody beautiful, it should be no bother for you because Allah made that person beautiful. If Allah made someone a millionaire, what business is it for you if Allah gave it? It could be, however, someone become a millionaire, could be a curse for them. Could be a curse for them, right? Could be a blessing for them. Maybe Allah make you millionaire tomorrow then, give you. But the point is that Allah is giving it. وَآتَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْكُنُوزِ. We gave him from wealth. Allah says it would have taken a band of strong men to carry the keys to his treasures. I mean, he had that much power and wealth, okay? And so the people, when they saw this, and this is important in terms of you as witnesses, not as bystanders, not as passive observers, but you as witnesses. The title of my second book, inshallah, coming out hopefully by end of the year, is about witnessing empathy, or the witness of empathy, right? So how do you see yourself in the world in which you live? Do you see yourself as a bystander? Do you see yourself as someone who's passive, or someone who's active, actively seeking empathy, right? So the people, they said to him, Qarun, they said, seek the next life. وَابْتَغِي فِيمَا آتَاكَ اللَّهُ دَارَ الْآخِرَةِ. Seek the next life with what Allah gave you in this life. If Allah gave you wealth, that's wonderful. But seek the next life, meaning use your wealth for something that is of a higher purpose and potential. Right? You could give charity, you could build something, you could help people with your money. And they said to him, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ فِي الدُّنْيا. Don't forget your portion of the world. And then وَأَحْسِنْ كَمَا أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ إِلَيْكَ. And show excellence to others where Allah showed you excellence. Right? Don't sow corruption on the earth. وَلَا تَبْغِي الْفَسَادَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Don't sow corruption on the earth. They're giving him this advice. Now for him, it made no difference. Because for the one who has, the psychopathic tendencies, it makes no difference. And so Allah in the Quran says, He says, so one is therefore the verbal response, right? So He says to them, قَالْ إِنَّمَا أُوتِيتُ عَلَى عِلْمٍ عِنْدِي. Whatever I have is because of whatever I've learned. Whatever I have is because of my own knowledge, right? So that's what you don't want to be like. You don't say, I am where I am today because of me, because of what I've done. We never say that as Muslims. We say, what? MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah. We say, by the grace of Allah, it's by the power of Allah. I'm just a weak human being with nothing. Right? You're nothing, really. Allah in the Quran says, Ya ayyuhan nas, O people, antumul fuqara ila Allah. You're all impoverished before Allah. And Allah is Ghani ul Hamid. Allah is Ghani. Allah is rich and free of all need. Think about our utter dependency on Allah. Right? You can't do anything. Nothing. There's no guarantee you will have the same strength you had today, you will have tomorrow. I had a friend who died, some years ago. He had cancer. And so I went to visit him on one of the days, at the end of his life. And so he said to me, and so I asked him, as we do, how are you, brother? And he said, as we respond, he says, Alhamdulillah, praise be to Allah. Praise be to Allah, irrespective of your condition. All praise is due to Allah. And then he said, brother, I woke up today, I could only see with one eye. I mean, his words cut me. That's what he said. He said, I woke up today, I could only see with one eye. And I thought to myself, self-reflection, I thought, did I wake up that morning, with the belief, a surety, certainty, that I'd be able to see with both eyes? Right? With that much health, as I had yesterday? It's a delusion. We shouldn't be like that. We should, in fact, Allah in the Quran says, وَلَا تَمْشِي فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَحًا. Don't walk on the earth with a sense of, arrogance, pride, as if you own the earth. Be humble and modest in your approach towards yourself and towards the world around you. And so he said, it made me reflect upon myself, because we don't sleep thinking we would have exactly what we had the day before when we wake up the next morning. But we end the night with praise of Allah, we begin the morning with praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they're saying to Qarun, you have a lot of money and wealth, use it for what Allah made you for, your purpose. And he says, no, what I have is because of my own knowledge. I have what I have because of my own knowledge. And then, and if it wasn't bad enough, the next ayah is, فَخَرَجَ عَلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فِي زِينَتِهِ. He comes out to his people with his pomp. Zina, with his pomp. He's come to show them. If you think I was like, I wasn't true, I'm going to show you what I have. Right? So what happens? Now, of course, it's going to breed a culture of envy. Right? If you have something great, it's like if you have a neighbor, and your neighbor has a wonderful new car. Right? Some people, they buy the cars only because they want to be seen in the cars. Isn't it? Not so much because of the car, but because of the image of themselves in the image of the car. Isn't it? It's about you want to look great in the image of the car, and so that's what you're living for. Right? Whereas the car could be a great car, could be wonderful because it could take you wonderful places, and it could be a great machine. I'm not saying don't buy good cars, I'm just saying about the fascination with the image of yourself. So if you're seeing yourself in the car. Now if your neighbor, so if you go to see your neighbor and you say, oh, what a wonderful car, and he says, yeah, I got this car because I worked very hard for this car, right? And you think to yourself, well, I can't work as hard as he can because I have a disability. That means I could never get the car that he has. Whereas if he had said, MashaAllah, la quwwata illa billah, by the grace of Allah, gift from Allah, favor of Allah, it's different. It's different because you're attributing all goodness unto Allah, not unto yourself. And so Qarun comes out with his wealth, right, to show his people. And then the people, they say, Allah says, the people who desire the life of this world, they said, Ya layta lana mithla ma utiya Qarun. If only we could have what Qarun has. If only we had what Qarun has. Right? And then the people who desire the next life, they came in, they said, no, you should wish to have the next life, because this life is just fleeting and passing, and we're all going to die soon anyway. Within, 100 years, there'll be other kids sitting in this university, studying whatever, so we're moving through. So don't make this your fascination entirely. You're live a wonderful life. I'm not against the selfie, by the way, just to emphasize. I'm not against nice clothing. I'm not against nice cars. I'm just saying the element of obsessiveness is the problem. Obsessiveness with that. Because once you're obsessed with it, you can't come out of it. You're stuck in it, and you're going to drown in it. And that's the problem. And so, Qarun, therefore, is a good example in the Quran of that ruler who didn't do well with the power and wealth that Allah gave him. Right? Image making. Now in the Quran at the same time you have examples of prophets. Let's take Sulaiman, it's an amazing example, Sulaiman alayhi salam. Now Sulaiman alayhi salam was a prophet who had power. Allah gave him authority and power and wealth and wisdom and all of these things. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam in the Quran. Now I'll give you an example, amazing example. Allah in the Quran says subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَحُشِّرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ جُنُودُهُ مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ وَالطَّيْرِ هُمْ يُزَعُونَ. That presented before Sulaiman were his army of humans and jinn and birds, and they're all arranged. Now, difference between hashara, fa'ala and fu'ila. Hashara meaning he gathered, he arranged, and hushara meaning it was arranged for him. He's therefore passive. He's the ruler and everything's arranged for him. So it kind of denotes a sense of power, doesn't it? You think of empire, civilization, you think of might, right? Grandeur, the scene of power, humans, jinn, birds, all arranged, that's his army. And then Allah in the Quran says, next verse, حَتَّى إِذَا أَتَوْا عَلَى وَادِ النَّمْلِ, until they come to the valley of the ants. This, by the way, is in the chapter called An-Naml, the chapter called the ants. And so Allah says, until they come to the valley of the ants. قالت نملة يا أيها النمل ادخلوا مساكنكم لا يحطمن سليمان وجنوده وهم لا يشعرون. Allah, until they come to the valley of the ants, and the female ant spoke and said to the other ants, O ants, enter your homes, because you don't want Sulaiman and his army to crush you while they don't perceive that they're going to crush you. Right? And so you think something amazing happening here, because on the one hand, it's the symbol, you're reflecting on the Quran, its power, might, civilization. But the next verse is like nothingness, emptiness, nothingness. Right? So, valley of the ants, right? And also it's a valley, so it's good. They're going down, and there's just ants, and you can hardly see the ants. I wrote an article published last year in the Journal of Space and Politics called Landscaping Otherness, Challenging Frames of Nothingness in Contemporary Palestine. About landscaping nothingness, right? And the elements of nothingness and otherness in the way that we perceive other human beings in our world today. And so, now the female ant spoke and said, "Oh ants, enter your homes." Notice it's maskana, it's your maskan, it's your home as opposed to your house. What do you gather from that? You gather a sense of privilege. Everyone is entitled to space and place, right? It doesn't say your house, your home, where you feel warmth and love and empathy in that place of the space of your home. Right? So even the ant is entitled to the home, a place of happiness and love and warmth and empathy, as opposed to the four walls of a house. And you don't want Sulaiman and his army to crush you when you don't perceive that it's going to crush you. Now Allah in the Quran says, فَتَبَسَّمَ ضَحِكَ مِنْ قَوْلِهَا. Sulaiman smiled, laughed when he heard the words of the ant. Right? And then he made this prayer to Allah. قَالَ رَبِّي أَوْزِعْنِي أَنْ أَشْكُرَ نِعْمَتَكَ الَّتِي أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيَّ وَعَلَى وَالِدَيَّ. He said, my Lord, inspire me to thank me for what you've blessed me with and blessed my parents with. So what do you see in this verse? An utter dependence. So here's a man who has power. He has power. The image is created not because of him, but for him. He didn't create it, it was created for him. وَحُشِّرَ لِسُلَيْمَانَ. It was made for him. The image, the scene of power is there. But what does he resort to? رَبِّي أَوْزِعْنِي. My Lord, inspire me to thank you for what you've blessed me and my parents with. So you would think, well, Sulaiman is the prophet. Doesn't he know how to thank Allah? No. Utter dependence. My Lord, teach me. I don't know. I need you to teach me and help me. Alhimni rushdi uqni shar. Teach me, inspire me to thank you. Now, not just what you've blessed me with, but bless my parents with. Right? So, you don't forget, therefore, your first dependence. You were dependent on your parents before anything else. When you couldn't talk and you couldn't speak and you couldn't eat, and your parents taught you the first words, or the first sounds, phonetics, they taught you your first moments, and you remember. Does not mean, therefore, outside of yourself, you can't see anybody, because now you've grown, like you're in university now, and so maybe you're making your own money, and you're wearing your own clothes, and you're buying your own clothes, and everything's wonderful. But remember, somebody put you there. Somebody financed probably you being here in the first place. Somebody's praying for you back home for you to succeed in your exams. If you pass your exams and you study really hard, it will seem as if your mother passed her exams. Will it not seem like that? It will seem as if your parents passed their own exams, right? Even though you're the ones who are studying. So when he says to Allah, Rabbi Awzi'ni, my Lord, inspire me to thank you for what you've blessed me with and blessed my parents with, Allah is making our minds traverse. We're moving, we're distancing, we're landscaping. We're going from the sight and scene of power to the scene of emptiness and nothingness, but still importance. Everybody has importance. The ant has its importance. That's the main thing in the Quran is the verse. And then it goes back to the Sulaiman, the subject himself, alayhi salam. And for him, it's one that's internalized. It's not even about seeing, it's about seeing within. It's reflecting within. My Lord, inspire me. And then he says, وَأَدْخِلْنِي وَأَنْ أَعْمَلَ صَالِحًا تَرْضَاهُ وَأَدْخِلْنِي بِرَحْمَتِكَ فِي عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And inspire me to do good actions that you're pleased with. So you would think to yourself, well, Sulaiman, he would know which actions to do because he's a prophet. But still, it's utter dependence on Allah, actions that you will make you most happy with me. And then وَأَدْخِلْنِي بِرَحْمَتِكَ فِي عِبَادِكَ الصَّالِحِينَ. And let me do good action, or and enter me into heaven amongst your pious servants. Right? So he doesn't say, well, obviously I'm a prophet, I'll be in heaven with other prophets. Right? I'll be in heaven with all the other great people. He's saying utter dependence on Allah, humbleness, mercy, humility. Enter me by your mercy amongst your pious servants. And who is the pious servant? There could be any pious believer, right? Not necessarily a prophet. Like him, Sulaiman alayhi salam. And so it's a good example in Sulaiman alayhi salam because it's a very different, it offsets the narrative that we see with Qarun. And then you have Dawood alayhi salam. Dawood was the father of Sulaiman in the Quran. Now look at Dawood's example. Amazing, beautiful. So Dawood's example, Allah said to the Prophet ﷺ, Allah in the Quran says, "Asbir ala ma yaqulun, wadhkur abdana Dawood, dhal aid innahu awwab." Allah says to the Prophet ﷺ, be patient about what they're saying about you, because the Quraysh, the Mushrikeen would say terrible things about the Prophet. He was a liar, he was a soothsayer, he was a magician, he was possessed, all these things they would say about him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, And so Allah says, be patient about what they say about you. And remember our servant Dawood alayhi salam, dhal aid, meaning he had power. The scholars, they say the power of obedience to Allah, dhal aid, innahu awwab. Awwab means the one, ar-raji ila Allah, returning to Allah. He was always returning to Allah. Okay, that's the description Allah gave him. And then Allah says, "Inna sakharna al-jibala yusabbihna wat-tayra mahshura kullu lahu awwab." We caused the mountains and the birds to remember Allah with Him, to gather above Him, remember Allah with Him, and all of them are awwab. All of them are returning to Allah. And so see what's happening here is really remarkable, because here you have Sulaiman alayhi salam, Dawood alayhi salam. He's remembering Allah. And everything is remembering Allah with him. Therefore, his power is not defined by his material possessions or even by his instruments of war or anything else. It's about his faith. That's the essence of power in Dawood alayhi salam. Dhal aid, meaning power in obedience to Allah. And in his remembering Allah, everything around him remembers Allah. Meaning if you move, the world will move with you. If you move in Allah's remembrance, the world will move with you. That's the point. And so Allah is giving consolation, reminded Prophet ﷺ that be patient. This is our, remember our servant Dawood alayhi salam like this. And so think therefore about these contrasts between Qarun on the one hand, the image maker, making an image for himself, living by the image, in the image, serving the image as opposed to serving the ideal, and then think about Sulaiman alayhi salam and Dawood, and both as contrasts to him in the prophetic realm, prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in the Prophet's time, of course, prophets are leaders, and they live in a society, and society is a complex mesh of all human beings. In society you have all kinds of people. You have those who are able and those who are disabled. You have those who are visually impaired. On the train coming here, there was a guy who was visually impaired. He needed help coming off the train, right? So you have people on wheelchairs. You have all kinds of people, of different colors, of different experiences, all kinds of people. The beautiful thing in the life of the Prophet ﷺ is that how he dealt with the diversity of human beings in his society. And this really is the work of prophets, the work of prophets, In the Prophet's time, there was a man called Julaybib. Maybe you might know of him or might have heard about him or read hadith concerning him. Julaybib radiallahu anh. Julaybib was someone who was He was not, he didn't have the best image. Rajul Namim, they call him, like he was not the most attractive of people, right? And so people, they kept their distance from him, right? Because they saw the image as representing the worth. If you see the worthfulness in the image, then you're wrong, you're mistaken. Because that's not where the worth is. The worth is what lies inside of a person, his heart, right? His ethics, his values, his motivations, his influences, his actions. These are represent his worth, not his outer image. That's not a person's worth. Never a person's worth, right? So he was like that. And so this is early in Islam. And so they were like, some people were new to Islam and they kept the distance from him because they thought he was just, like he looked like an outsider, frightening outsider for them. And so, the Prophet, spent time with him and he kept close to him to show the people that he's just like any one of us, In one occasion, Sahih Muslim, the hadith, it says that he was, one day after a battle, he was missing. And the Prophet asked his companions a question, هَلْ تَفْقِدُونَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ? Are you missing anybody? And they said, Na'am, fulan wa fulan wa fulan. We miss this and that person. And then he asked again, هَلْ تَفْقِدُونَ مِنْ أَحَدٍ? Are you missing anybody? And they said, Na'am, fulan wa fulan wa fulan. This. He asked the third time, are you missing anybody? And they said, no, we don't miss anybody else after that. And then the Prophet says, وَلَكِنْ يَفْقِدُ جُلَيْبِيبَ, but I miss Julaybib. So go and find him. Now you see what's happening. What's the dynamic that's happening here? Where is the Prophet's concern and care? It's not necessarily with the concern and concern with all the others. They're remembering their friends, their cohorts. They're remembering their buddies. Those who are not there should be there. But he's remembering the one that's like the outsider, who's not seen, who's unseen, unheard, unloved. Right? I gave a talk in one university, and so the guys came to pick me up, and so we went there, and they were discussing in the car on the way, and they said that one guy committed suicide in the university. And so I said, I said, well, didn't you know that person? Did you know him? The guy said he kept himself to himself. It was only in hindsight and reflection I thought to myself, well, isn't that then the reason to know him if he keeps himself to himself? If he keeps himself to himself, isn't that more the reason than to get to know him? Right? That we have human codes of recognizability. You recognize yourself when you see yourself in the mirror. Everybody has the same human codes of recognizability. You can recognize yourself in another person quite easily because you have the same things on a very external level, right? So he's a human being like you. He has feelings just like you. He has hopes and dreams and desires just like you. He has fears and anxieties and pressures just like you. And if he keeps himself to himself, and maybe that's more the reason than to kind of befriend him and get to know him. We learn, of course, in hindsight. We learn, sadly, in hindsight. And so the Prophet kept himself close to this companion. And so when they asked, when he says, I miss him, go and find him, they went and found him, and then he had been killed, right? Martyred on the battle. And so they brought the Prophet, and the Prophet saw the man. And the Prophet looked at him and he said these words. He says, هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ. هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ. هَذَا مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنْهُ. This man is from me and I am from him. This man is from me and I am from him 3 times. Right? Look at the closeness, intimate closeness, attachment, connection, bonding. This man is from me and I'm from him. Amazing. I think the Prophet's companions hearing those words, that's the same person we kept distance from, is the one the Prophet is bringing in so closely. And then the narrator says, فَوَضُوا عَلَى سَاعِدَيْهِ لَيْسَ لَهُ سَرِيرٌ إِلَّا سَاعِدُ النَّبِيِّ صلى الله عليه وسلم. And then he put Julaybib in his arms, and the narrator says, Julaybib had no pillow on that day, except the arms of the Prophet. So one therefore is a verbalized love and connection, and the other is an actualized one, showing a human connection between the Prophet and this companion Julaybib radiallahu anh. Therefore showing us and teaching his companion, teaching us that his worthfulness is not defined by his outer form. Right? People change. Right? You change, you can change, you will change, right? But what will remain with you is your inner state. And if you focus on building that inner state and making that really beautiful, making your heart really beautiful, a heart that is remembering Allah. Allah in the Quran says, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Remember me and I will remember you. Now if you think, okay, let's say the obsessive with Instagram, like the girl I mentioned in the newspaper article, 20 minutes taking the photograph of herself, right, because she has to show, and then not enough likes. So maybe you might scrap and delete the picture because not enough likes for the picture. Or maybe you think, well, next time I'll do a better picture and get more likes than my best friend or my neighbor, whoever, or my rival in school or whatever, right? But the problem is in being remembered, right? Compare and despair. So you're comparing, but you're despairing. Because you're comparing, you're despairing. And Allah in the Quran says, remember me and I will remember you. So if you remember Allah, it's not the person is remembering you and not remembering you the next day. Allah is always remembering you if you choose to remember Him. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Remember me and I will remember you. And that should bring in the heart of the believer the greatest satisfaction. That the Lord of the heavens and the earth is remembering you because you're spending your time remembering Him. And that's really where we should be as human beings, as Muslims. Right? So don't become obsessive with your outer form. Don't discriminate others because of their outer form. Musa alayhi salam in the Quran couldn't speak too well. He speaks like with a lisp. You know, Allah in the Quran says his prayer in the Quran, رَبِّ اشْرَحْ لِي صَدْرِي وَيَسِّرْ لِي أَمْرِي وَاحْلُلْ عُقْدَةً مِّن لِسَانِي يَفْقَهُوا قَوْلِي. My Lord, unloose a knot from my tongue. This is why he asked Allah to send Harun, who أَفْصَحُ مِنِّي, he's better in speech than me. Couldn't speak too well, but he's a mighty messenger of Allah, Musa alayhi salam. Ayyub alayhi salam was the one who had so many illnesses, diseases from his skin, you know. And he says, وَأَيُّوبْ إِذْ نَادَى رَبُّ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. When he cried to his Lord, is my Lord, this hardship has touched me and you're the most merciful, the most merciful. But he had that, but he was a prophet of Allah. Or what about Yaqub alayhi salam? Yaqub, the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, Joseph. You know, he became blinded. وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزَنِ. Some scholars say fully blind, some say partially blind because of grief and crying over his son Yusuf alayhi salam. But he was a prophet of Allah. Right? So those do not take away from the greatness of those people. That one might be blind, or that one might be struggling in his speech, or that one might be diseased, does not take away from the greatness of those people. Because the focus is not on the image or the image making. It's on the essence, it's on the ideal, what's inside of you, by your values and your principles in life, by your mercy, by your care, by your kindness, by your compassion, all of these things. That's what it should be, right? This is a message should be reinforced again and again and again, right? To all people. It give yourself a sense of self-encouragement. Allah in the Quran says, if you make this your life, your motto in life, your pursuit in life, it will produce an internal happiness that's going to remain with you. But if you go away from this and you just made the outer form your pursuit in life, it will be so fast it will pass you by, and then you'll be left there thinking, what has just happened, right? And so we ask Allah give us strength, and Allah give us aid and assistance, and make us of those who think about those who are unseen. You know, Eduardo Galeano has a poem called Las Nadis. Las Nadis are the nobodies. And in his poem he says, in the world there are those who are nobodies, nobodied, and like no ones. And he says there are the ones who are not but could be. The ones who are not but could be. The ones who don't have names, they have numbers. They don't speak language, they speak dialects. They don't, they don't have religion, they have folklore. They don't have art, they have handcrafts. And he says this is a way that, others might diminish the importance of others because all they're seeing of value is how good a person looks. That's his image value. And based upon the image value, he's a person worthy of befriending or not befriending. But it should not be like that. Because if it's like that, we will only exclude everyone from our lives except ourselves, and that's a terrible way to live. And so we ask Allah for assistance and help. Jazakumullah khairan.
the floor to questions.
That's fine.
I'll kick off. So you mentioned that it's not haram, for example, to take a selfie. I seem to remember, I'm not saying there is, I seem to remember a hadith where, or is it an ayah in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He's beautiful and He likes that which is beautiful. So to what extent can we sort of beautify ourselves and make it so that we look good and we're happy with our appearance, but sort of at the same time not become arrogant or prideful?
No, but that was the purpose of my entire talk, isn't it? That's what I spoke about for an hour, speaking about that question. The hadith that says, "Inna Allah jameel yuhibbul jamal." Allah is beautiful, Allah loves beauty. So there's nothing wrong with the selfie, or even in seeing yourself as beautiful. Nothing wrong with that. You're supposed to make yourself look good. But I'm saying if it becomes obsessive, if you use that obsessiveness to compete against other people's beauty or other people's images, then it becomes, of course, destructive, because it's going to harm yourself, your own soul, and it would breed a culture of envy in the lives of others, Yeah.
I remember reading something in the social science literature about the concept of celebrity and the way that it's a socially constructed notion to enforce capitalism as an ideology. I was wondering whether there's anything that you've come across with that, whether you could speak to that point about how...
I think it's quite true, because if you think about, if you imagine yourself, since you were 5 years old, you're watching commercials, advertisements on TV. Each one you watch is selling you this idea that your happiness is in consumption. Each one telling you, you want to be happy, buy this thing, isn't it? Then you don't feel happy because you don't get that thing, right? And so you're living 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, now you're 25 years old, and you've lived through that, that machine, right? Selling you that same idea that your happiness is in consumption. If you don't have, you won't be happy. And then when you have, it doesn't last very long, and therefore you want to have something else because that didn't fulfill you, right? So of course, Neil Gable, he argues that the celebrity is designed to kind of satisfy our exaggerated expectations of human greatness. That we as people always look for heroes, as those are greater than ourselves. And so we invent the celebrity to fit into this mold, right? In his book, and also Neil Postman, in Building a Bridge to the 18th Century, has another book. There's many books. Chris Hedges, he has an Empire of Illusion. There's many books. The idea that the celebrity will serve the purpose of being in your heart and mind the one that you idolize. That's your hero. You would want to be like that person. But around the celebrity, of course, is an industry of manufacturing, of creating trademarks and mugs and T-shirts and so many things. And of course, there's an entire industry around one single celebrity. And of course, it's going to feed into capitalism, because you're being taught to or being trained to buy, because your happiness is in that consumption. I'm not saying again that a child, for example, who likes Batman shouldn't wear Batman. I'm not saying that. My son is 11; he still wears Batman pajamas. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when it's used, use it. When it's in moderation. Everything in the Quran, Allah says, "Wala tusrifu." Don't go to an excess in things, but don't become compulsive. Don't become sort of impulsive, and don't become extreme and excessive in these things, because I think before anything it will just destroy the soul before it destroys your bank balance, Yeah.
How do you effectively strike the balance between these two opposites?
Well, I think the first thing what's really helpful is that you say what our Prophet encourages to say every day in the morning, or every time you, like I said, looking at yourself in the mirror, just pause for a moment, reflect on your image. Even if you're taking a selfie, that's your reflection. Allahumma ahsin khuluqi kama ahsanta khalqi. Make my character beautiful like you made my form excellent, So therefore, the one that's internalized is the importance of the heart and the character above the image. Now, it's true, of course, Allah loves for you to be beautiful. That's true, and to be beautiful, to dress nicely. I'm not saying, I emphasize again in my talk, I'm not saying that's not good. It's a good thing to do that. But not at the expense of others. At the expense of others, where you only see yourself in a mold of superficial greatness, and you can't see other people who are struggling along in life, and you have no sense of empathetic contagion or concern for others, because you're so wrapped up in your own finite human existence. I think there has to be a bit of a breakaway from this. That you put some kind of self-sacrifice, over, self-interest. You put frugality over greed. You put contentment over extravagance. Because if you don't, then you won't see the world. You'll see yourself, and you'll look beautiful to yourself. You see, and I think that's damaging, because you're not fulfilling your truest potential, as a Muslim in your heart, and also towards others in the world around you. There was a man called Zahir in the Prophet's time, and he was a man who was so poor. I mean, he was so poor. He used to live outside of Medina, and he used to come inside to Medina with like bits of cheese, bits of pieces of stuff, because he could afford nothing, as gifts to the Prophet ﷺ, as bits of cheese. He used to lay out his mat in Medina, selling a few bits of pieces. And once the Prophet came behind him, put his hands behind his eyes like this, behind him. And Zahir is saying, "Who is it?" But then he smelled the scent, and he realized it was the Prophet himself. And then he turned around, and then the Prophet says, "Man yashtari hadha al-abd?" Who will buy this slave? Who will buy this slave? And then the man says, "Idhan tajiduni kasida." Then you will find me cheap. I will be cheap merchandise if I'm sold, right? I'll make nothing for anybody. And then the Prophet says to him, "Walakin indallahi sabikati." But with Allah, you're not cheap. You're not cheap merchandise. The idea is to give people hope. I think people are struggling. I spoke. My Friday sermon, in fact, was about. So it was Self-Harm Awareness Day on Thursday last week. Did you guys know that? Last week on Thursday was Self-Harm Awareness Day. Why are people harming themselves? Why does someone take a knife and cut their skin? Why do people do that? For many reasons. Trauma, abuse, sexual abuse, bullying, peer pressure, isolation. All these are things. So just imagine, if you're overindulging and just fixing your own image, and life is good and sweet for you, and somebody else next to you is just hiding the scars on their arms, right? Or suffering because of anything else. A woman, it's amazing. A woman once came and she says, "Ya Rasulullah," it says this woman, she had a mental illness, mentally ill. And she came and she said, "Ya Rasulullah, I have a need. I want you to fulfill for me." Now look at the Prophet's reply to her. You know what he said to her? He said, "Unduri ayy sakaki shi'ti hatta aqdi." Look to see which road you would want me to stand on with you, so I could fulfill your need for you. I thought, wow. Anybody who's worked with people who have mental illness, Asperger's, autism, knows about the importance of the power of choice. The Prophet gave this woman the power of choice. As opposed to saying, "Okay, let's hear your problem." He says, "No, you choose where you want to stand, where you're comfortable, and I'll just fulfill your need for you." And I thought, how remarkably empathic. Empathy, mercy, right? And there's people, of course, who have concerns in life. So the idea is, don't wrap yourself up in this world because you can't see anything else outside of your world. But treat it with caution, with balance, and not with extravagance or overindulgence. That's what I think. Allahu Alam. Yeah.
What practical advice would you offer to someone who is obsessed with this
Obsessed? I don't think anyone's obsessed. I don't think you guys are not obsessed with anything, are you? No, I think the first thing is seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Seek refuge with Allah. Seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Dua, ask Allah to help you with this. I think any obsessiveness in anything is wrong, is harmful. Any obsessiveness, eating too much of anything or anything is harmful because you're not striking the balance in life. And so I think that one of the things I think is important very much because I write about it a lot these days is empathy, right? So the more concern you have for others, the more you will see your own self-importance. The more concern you have for others, you will see your own lack of your own self-importance. You see, if you just look around the world, always be of those who give, be charitable, be kind in your words, be merciful, These things, this is about you as an individual basis. So you don't fall into this trapping, And I think if you're doing these things, then just kind of cut down slowly, isn't it? Cut down slowly. This is what I think, Allah knows best.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for coming and listening. Jazakallah khair.